I'm delighted to welcome Kate Chaytor-Norris to Thriving in Our 40s. And we're here to talk about a topic that I imagine pretty much everyone can relate to, and that is stress. Now, before we jump into this, I want to give Kate a proper introduction because she has got a wealth of knowledge. She has been a practicing nutritional therapist for the past 15 years, and it is her mission to educate us as to why our modern day environment is making us so chronically sick and what we can do about it. Kate has also written a book called I Wish My Doctor Had Told Me This, and she wrote this, and I quote, to empower people to take their health into their own hands. Kate's work involves a holistic approach where she looks at the entire body to work out what systems are out of balance, be it our digestive system, our skin, our hormones, and then she provides the right nutrients to help our body rebalance itself. Kate, I'm thrilled to welcome you to Thriving in Our 40s.
Well, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to once again stand on my soapbox and talk about things that I love talking about.
Well, that's brilliant. It's going to be such an important conversation, and I can't wait for everyone to listen and learn from everything that you have to say. So we're going to jump straight in with probably the most obvious question, but I think it's a really important one. Why do we suffer from stress in the first place?
Stress is just a survival strategy that the body has developed. I mean, our body is the most amazing piece of machinery, and its remit is to keep us safe. So the stress response was developed, I guess, over time when we were living in caves, when our life was much more life-threatening. And so that is basically what our body is responding to, a life-threatening situation. And the trouble is that now, we are not generally living in a life-threatening situation, but that is the only way our body knows how to respond. So if we're stuck in traffic late for an important meeting, or we open our inbox and it's like overwhelmed with emails, or, all the kind of chronic life stress things that happen, our body thinks that, there's a saber-toothed tiger around the corner.
So what is happening then when we are under stress? And for example, we're stuck in traffic, like you say, or we've got a to-do list that is never ending. What is happening to our body and our mind as we are going through those stress symptoms?
So from a mind point of view, we tend to be operating from the reptilian hindbrain, which is our kind of fight, flight, survival brain, not from the prefrontal cortex, which is our lovely bit of the brain, which obviously developed the latest and allows us to do sort of logical, practical, rational thinking. So when we're operating from there, it makes it very hard to think in a calm, rational way. From our body's point of view, we are getting ready to fight or flight. So therefore, all the resources will be going into energy, into muscles, increasing our heart rate to get the blood round and the oxygen round. But the trouble is, when our body is prioritizing that, a lot of the housekeeping jobs like digestion, detoxing, our immune system, regeneration and repair, they all get put on the back burner because that are not a priority if you're about to be eaten by a tiger. So, and that's fine if you do your quick fight flight moment, escape from the tiger, then you go back to your cave and you can chill out. But with chronic stress, we then are sort of sitting in that fight flight situation where the body is always hypervigilant. And always the housekeeping jobs are being slightly shelved. And so that is why stress has such a profound effect on our body and our long-term health and well-being.
Well, I wanted to talk about the long-term effects of it actually, Kate, because personally, I don't feel I'm chronically stressed, but I do feel that I'm on a roller coaster daily of being calm and then chaotic. And that is modern day life. I get that, but I don't like roller coaster that I'm on. And I sometimes look at my children, particularly in the morning as we're trying to get out of the house, and I'll come down calm, and the next minute I'm literally in their faces and they're like, whoa, what has just happened? You know,
Yeah.
I can switch very quickly. So, and I feel that's a daily pattern that's happening.
Yeah.
So what do you classify as long-term stress? And what is that going to be doing to us physically, mentally, you know, and at this stage of life as well, hormonally?
Wow.
Big
Okay.
question.
There's so many. I suppose one of the biggest elements that stress disrupts is our blood sugar control. So when we are stressed, our body will produce stress hormones, obviously adrenaline for that really heart lurching, nearly run over by a bus moment. But then your kind of more chronic stress, cortisol, which keeps your blood sugar levels high. Now, if you are not running away or fighting and burning off that sugar, basically sugar in the bloodstream that's sort of hanging around causes a lot of damage. It will stick to things. So it sticks to our blood vessel walls, which is the kind of beginnings of cardiovascular disease. The immune system will pile in to see what's going on, and then cholesterol will be sent to try and heal it. And you get this sort of build-up of plaque on the inside of the blood vessel wall. And inflammation is the bedrock of all chronic disease. You're always going to have an inflammatory element to any kind of chronic disease. So you're just kind of poking the bear with, tipping the body into that sort of chronic disease state. So it's huge, and I'm just trying to think what else you're going back to your question.
So hormones as well, because in previous conversations, obviously I've talked a lot about the perimenopause and what is happening to us hormonally during midlife.
Yeah.
And so hormonally, what can stress do to us?
All our hormones work in a beautiful orchestra together. All the hormones affect others. But when your body is prioritizing keeping you safe, it will prioritize making cortisol, which is higher up the pecking order than things like progesterone and estrogen and testosterone. So that's all further down the scale, because really it's not a priority for you to be making babies if you're about to be eaten by tigers. So, that gets shelved. So that's why we can find these, when people are chronically stressed, this huge imbalance in hormones, because we've also got a situation in our environment where we are being exposed to lots of estrogen-like substances. So chemicals in the environment that have a similar shape to estrogen, so they can plug into our estrogen receptors. And that means that many, many women are estrogen dominant. So that creates the kind of, heavy periods, endometriosis type situation, lots of kind of breast pain.
Where are we getting these chemicals from? Those from the products that we are using?
Products that you're using on your skin.
Okay.
And also the biggest source, I think, is water. So many women are taking, the pill or on a HRT, and that all gets, peed into the water system. The government and the water companies know that this is a problem, but nobody is prepared to invest in the filtration system to get the hormones out, because estrogen is a very tiny molecule. So you'd have to have quite specialist systems. I mean, I'm always recommending to clients that they get a reverse osmosis water filter, because that will clear out all the hormones and any nasties.
And you can get that quite easily online, can you?
Yeah, you can. I mean,
Okay.
there are better ones. I mean, and I don't know if you have a sort of facility where I can send you links for sort of good products that people can, have a look at, because
I'll put them in the show notes, definitely. Yes, please. Any links like that will be fabulous.
we can do that. Because the downside about reverse osmosis is because it's clearing everything out. It also takes out the minerals. So
Right.
you want ideally a reverse osmosis that will then remineralize the water. And
Okay.
there's a really good one. There's an amazing chap in Scotland who I deal with, who is so passionate about water. I mean, he's fascinating to talk to. And he set up a company which, sells really good quality ones. So those are the ones I
Okay.
tend to recommend.
Okay. So then going back to then the hormones and the impact of stress, like you're saying, so cortisone is overriding the
Yes.
rest of the hormones going on at this stage of life. And if we've got high cortisone levels, obviously that's going to be impacting us day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, when you have long-term stress, it's the lovely, amazing adrenal glands that sit on top of our kidneys, at the back. They obviously produce adrenaline, but they are responsible for producing cortisol. And if you're asking them to produce loads of cortisol 24/7, they get tired. And what happens when we get to menopause, when our ovaries stop producing so much estrogen and progesterone, it is the adrenal glands that have to take over that job, because we do need to have some in our bodies going forward. If your adrenals are on the floor because they've been very busy producing loads of cortisol, they are not then going to go, oh, well, let's just produce estrogen and progesterone. So that lovely, ideally seamless change from perimenopause to menopause is not quite so seamless, because you kind of get slightly dropped off a cliff, and that can cause, all sorts of problems, as many of your listeners might know.
And so is that why people have to resort to the likes of HRT to balance those hormones and the fluctuation that has been happening maybe over many years because of the stress levels?
I think so. I mean, when we look at indigenous societies, again, the experience for them going through menopause is so different.
Yeah.
Menopause is looked forward to, it is revered, it is almost like a sort of coming of age. You've really earned your spurs when you've hit the menopause. And if you are in a society that has shaman healers, you can't be a shaman healer until you've been through the menopause. So
Amazing.
it's looked on in such a positive light, as opposed to over here in the West, where we're kind of, shriveled up crones, which is just depressing.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
not true.
no, and just not true. And I'm always, looking at these societies where it's all, it's so positive. But when we look at their experiences of, all the kind of, hot flushes, vaginal dryness, all the bits that go with menopause symptoms, they just don't get them. I think also because they're living in a much more natural environment, they won't be exposed to so many chemicals. But I think they tend to have a much more mindful existence. And
That's so interesting. Well, I would love to move on from that actually and talk about how we can manage the symptoms that we suffer with during stress.
yes,
Um, I personally feel that we can't obviously get rid of stress completely, and I think a little bit of stress is a good thing. It keeps us moving forward, it keeps us motivated, it's about ambition. However, as we've touched upon, life is hectic and long-term stress obviously is not healthy. So, as through your work as a nutritional therapist, how can we incorporate nutrition and look at it in a way that it's going to help us manage stress? Are there foods that we should be consuming over others? And for the ones that we shouldn't be consuming because they can maybe aggravate
mm,
stress.
yeah, 100%. Basically, it's coming back to the kind of blood sugar balance, because if you are
Okay.
eating food that keeps your blood sugars nice and balanced, that's much less stressful for the body.
Okay.
Um, it's a funny one in that, I can have people coming and sitting on my sofa and they go, oh, I'm not stressed. And they're not stressed in their heads, but their bodies are running a load of stress. And
That's really interesting.
they can be the kind of people who, so with regards to things that are going to spike your blood sugar levels, obviously sugar, but
Yeah.
that is also kind of refined carbohydrates, which don't necessarily taste sweet. But say you eat a piece of white bread, there's not
Mhm.
much substance to it. So it's broken down very quickly. And so the
Okay.
sugar release into the bloodstream is pretty speedy. We've then also got things like coffee and tea, caffeine and alcohol. So those are the kind of big spikers. And in order to try and kind of ameliorate and make sure that, you know, you are obviously your blood sugar levels are going to rise a bit after you've eaten, but you want there to be a nice sort of gentle curve, not a great big spike where your body then has to produce loads of insulin, which brings it crashing back down. And then you get
Okay.
kind of mid-morning, oh, I need a coffee and a biscuit kind of thing to keep me going. And you do your coffee and a biscuit and then you spike it again. So you spend the whole day, you know, swinging up and down, which is really stressful for the body because it's
Okay.
constantly having to manage this situation where the sugars are flying up and down. What you put in your body at the beginning of the day, so whatever you break your fast with, and it's not necessarily, you know, people might not have breakfast, you might wait till lunch, but whatever you break your fast with, it wants to be savory, ideally, and full of protein and have some good fat in it, because that means that whatever you put in first thing is going to really dictate what your blood sugar levels are going to do for the rest of the day. So if you can do a nice, gentle energy injection at the beginning of the day, then everything will be smoother.
It makes such sense, Kate, and I'm thinking about that obviously from an adult's perspective, but also from a child's perspective.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about what my children eat for breakfast, and
And
you're absolutely right. It's like pushing them off a cliff and say, "Good luck, get on with that now for the rest of the day."
you're
Um,
sending them to school and you expect them to sit quietly and listen to and do their lessons and stuff, and you basically, yeah, the normal breakfast in the West is kind of some kind of sugary cereal, particularly, you know,
yes,
love it. You know, it's
yeah.
delicious. But I'm always, you know, saying, you know, get eggs into your kids at the beginning of the day. Or I don't mind what they want. You know, I mean, you can make it funny and make it a joke. I mean, sometimes I have, you know, families where they're all having chicken stew for breakfast,
Oh
and
my
it's all like really weird, but actually, it's a great start for the day.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? And so just to go back, it's about keeping things. It's about your blood sugar level, and that will obviously have a huge impact, like you
Mm.
say, on the stress that you might experience through the rest of the day. If your body can keep a gentle momentum, that will help when it comes to your emotional reaction to
Yeah,
almost kind of not react in such a volatile way.
it will help. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, obviously, how we react to stress is a hugely personal thing and can be dictated by many, many factors.
Okay.
But I love John. I don't know if you come across John Kabat-Zinn, who
No.
about mindfulness. Well, he has a lovely phrase, and that is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So it's almost like, you know, you are totally in control and responsible for how you choose to react to any situation in life, which is quite annoying because it's quite nice to be able to blame somebody else or something.
Yes, absolutely.
Handle. Um, but I think um, it's about, I think when we've had long-term stress, I mean, it's a really complex thing. And our stress response can be set when we're really tiny. I mean, even in the womb,
Mm,
your mum has been really stressed and you've been exposed to a lot of cortisol in the womb, your system will reset. And it's almost like your body goes, oh, blimey, it must be really scary out there because my mum's really stressed. So I need to come out and I
mm.
need to be hypervigilant. So, you know, that can start you off on a tricky track. And then obviously our experiences in childhood can also set how we respond to stress. It's all undoable, but it does take time, you know, and it
Well,
takes a lot of gentleness and compassion because you've got these almost like, I mean, in my trauma training, we talk about these little people inside us, you know, who may have experienced trauma. And it's about kind of reparenting them and reassuring them that they can stand down and not make you so hypervigilant and overreactive to stress. And it's a
I,
very beautiful process, but it takes time. You know, your system's not kind of suddenly just go, oh, you know, everything's fine. I'm just going to sort of chill in a deck chair.
well, as much as we wish to do that, but I think that's also reassuring to hear, though, Kate, because I think when you get to a certain stage of life, you think, well, this is me. I can't change it. Why should I change it? And
Mm.
you might not like that part of you that you currently are. And I think that's what I I'm trying to do with these conversations is that we can change, and it's all a positive change, and it just takes a little bit of time and awareness to do that.
100%. And I think one thing that I have found very useful for me is, when we have had trauma in childhood, very often we can dissociate from our bodies. It's almost like, we're just going to cut off because it feels not great.
Yeah.
And so it's about getting people to get back in touch with their body.
Mm,
And
yeah.
really giving them space to actually feel what's going on. Our bodies are the most incredibly wise, intuitive beings, and they do not lie. So if you can really listen to them, that kind of gut feeling, but it may not be
Mm,
your gut, it might be your shoulder or your elbow or something
yeah.
that's giving you a feedback. If you can take the time to kind of tune in and go, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And give yourself some space. It's amazing what insights can come up. And then you can work with those, because it's sometimes, as you say, we're really stressed about stuff and like we don't really know what we're stressed about.
But your body's indicating that there is something going on.
Absolutely. I mean, there's another amazing book by a chap called Bessel van der Kolk who wrote
Okay.
The Body Keeps the Score, which is a phenomenal book. He was a psychotherapist dealing with Vietnam vets, so you can imagine trauma off the scale.
Wow.
They were doing counselling and talking therapy, and nothing was working. And he basically said, we need to get into the body because that's where it's all being held, and
Yeah.
it's not up here.
It's in the body.
And so there's lots of amazing somatic therapies that people are now starting to use to really help to calm and reassure the body and help that kind of stress response stand down.
Well, we'll put those links in the show notes as well, so people can look deeper into that.
Yeah.
You touched on fasting very briefly when we were talking about food, and actually that's a part that I want to talk about now, and talk about meal planning.
Mm.
Fasting's been out there for a bit now. There's a lot of discussion whether it's good for you, whether it's bad for you. I've read a lot that for women of our age, it's not a particularly good thing for our bodies to be going through. So I would love your opinion when it comes to meal planning
Okay.
and fasting, what we should be doing in our 40s to help us to remain more balanced and, importantly, given that energy as well.
Yeah. That I wish I could say there's a one size fits all formula.
Oh.
Sadly not. And I think this is where it comes into really listening to your body. Because when we fast, we are asking the adrenals to produce cortisol to keep our blood sugar levels up. If you've got very tired adrenals and you go on kind of long fasts, that's actually, quite tough on the body.
A long fast, we're saying what, hours, days, because people can do ridiculously long fasts.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I am a big fan of intermittent fasting. That's the kind of, extending your overnight fast for a bit longer. And it sort of depends, if you have got blood sugar issues. So if you feel dizzy, wobbly, shaky, hangry, that kind of thing, if you don't eat regularly, then that's a sign that, your blood sugar levels are a bit all over the place. And so when they're dropping, your adrenals are not producing enough cortisol to keep them balanced. So you get that
Mm.
kind of low blood sugary type thing.
So it's very personal, obviously,
It's
but
very personal. So
so,
with the intermittent fasting, I would say, wherever you are, say you do 12 hours, maybe experiment with adding another 2 hours on and see how you feel.
so
You know,
what's the benefit of fasting though?
So fasting, oh, amazing. I mean, so if we work on the premise that 3 meals a day is purely a social construct, when we were living in caves, you'd have been lucky if you were eating once a day.
Yeah.
And when we go into a fasting state, basically it ramps up all the good things in the body, all the kind of healing things, because we need to be on tip top form to go out hunting to get more food. So our body has a kind of clear out, and we do a thing called autophagy, which is, I always think of it as, the little sort of Pac-Men that you in those sort of electronic games that you used to have, and they
Yes.
go around the body
Yeah.
clearing up debris. When we get into that sort of, you have to be fasting for, I think it's over 16 hours before you hit autophagy.
Yeah.
But it gives the whole digestive system a rest. It means the liver, bless it, the liver, my goodness, it does the most amazing job, because we live in such a toxic world.
Mm.
Um, and every time we're eating, it obviously plays a huge part in that. So it's like constantly kept busy. So if you can have a bit of a break from eating, it means that the liver, instead of digesting food, can go, right, okay, we're going to clear out the cupboards. I put a whole load of toxins in that shoulder joint, a few months ago. We're going to go in and clear that out. So it's a wonderful way of letting the body do a bit of a reset.
And do you have to do that every day?
It's up to you. I mean, I find
Right.
a lot of
Okay.
people who start intermittent fasting, they go, well, actually, this just really suits me and it's really easy. I
Mm.
just have lunch and supper and just don't eat breakfast. And a lot of my clients, I'll say, do you eat breakfast? And they go, well, yeah, because it's the most important meal of the day. I'm not really very hungry, but I know I should. I'm like, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Again, it's
Interesting.
like a 3 meals a day thing, and the ridiculous thing of breakfast being the most important meal of the day. If you're not hungry, just wait till you are.
And then eat something that, like you alluded to, is not high in sugar and is going to keep you sustained for hours afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah, no,
Okay.
savoury.
So so meal planning is very personal, obviously. Fasting is what works for you. I think the idea of breakfast during the week, school time.
Mm,
I imagine many parents don't have time to grab a slice of toast, let alone kind of sit down and have breakfast. So it all depends on people's schedules.
yeah,
What about exercise, Kate? Now I love walking. I could happily walk forever. And it's my way to get exercise, but it's also my way to de-stress. It's my way to come up with ideas. It's how I prepare for these podcasts. I know other people do other forms of exercise, whether
yeah,
that is for physical benefit or for stress relief.
mm.
Is all exercise good for stress? Should we always be trying to move to alleviate those stress symptoms?
I think, yes, movement's really, really hugely beneficial, whatever
Okay.
form. But what I will say is that if you have got very tired adrenals and you're going to the gym and, hitting it on the running machine or doing hit sessions, or um, it can be a little counterproductive. But again, it's about really listening to your body. And if you go and do exercise and you come away feeling brilliant, I feel really on top of the world, then actually what you've done is okay and it's good for the body. But some people will go, oh, they're dragging themselves to the gym, or they're desperately trying to lose weight, doing all sorts of cardiovascular and feeling absolutely wiped out afterwards. And the trouble is, when you stress the body like that, it tends to hang on to, it goes into survival mode. So it's going to hang on to all the fat because it's like, oh, this is really stressful. I'm a big fan of movement, full stop. Walking, amazing. One of the best forms of exercise. Pilates and yoga, which is all about
Mhm.
strength. Something that's sort of come into my remit in the last few years that's really becoming very important is the correlation between sarcopenia, so that is muscle loss as we get older, and longevity and chronic disease. So if you've got good muscle tone and you can maintain it as you get older, it's going to stand you in really, really good stead. So therefore, it's the weights and the
Okay.
resistance training that's going to be really good to maintain the muscle.
Well, in previous conversations, I've spoken to both a Pilates teacher and a personal trainer, and it was all about the strength. And some people don't like using weights, but that's where I imagine the idea of Pilates or yoga. That's when it kind of it's a substitute for lifting,
Yeah,
because you're working the whole body, you're working with your body mass, and
yes,
how important it is. And interestingly as well, you saying listening to your body. I've got a conversation coming out soon, and we talk a bit more about perimenopause and the different stages we go through within that cycle. And the girl that I was talking to said we should, really look at it as a season. Each cycle as a season. There's going to be a week where you're going to be wanting to be outside and hitting it like it's summer, and then there's going to be the autumn winter time when you're going to want to be cozy and maybe doing something a bit more relaxed like yoga or Pilates. And so create variety within your
Yes.
exercise routine as well, which I'm really bad at. I'm just like, right, I know what I'm doing, just done. But actually,
Yeah, I know, I'm totally
it
with
doesn't work.
you. I have my routine and that's what I do.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, but
actually,
it's not always beneficial.
no, and I think, it's just that kindness to the body, listening in, and if your body's going, I really, really don't want to go to the gym today, just go, okay, right, well, we'll do some stretching at home, or just be prepared to turn it round.
Can I ask you a personal question when it comes to your own stress?
Mm,
What does when you feel you are getting stressed,
mm.
what does it look and feel like for you? And then how do you manage it?
Um, I have this kind of anxiety that kind of sits here.
Okay.
Um,
Around your heart.
yeah, it's a kind of overwhelm. Oh my God, just everything's getting on top of me. But I'm very aware of it now. And the first place I will go to is my breathing. Because, when we get stressed, we tend to breathe more shallowly to do our fighting and flighting. And of course, it's a bit of a kind of double-edged sword, because when we breathe like that, the feedback mechanism up to the brain is going, oh, she's breathing really shallowly, there must be a saber-toothed tiger around the corner. And it's almost like, when people are trying to override their stress, you can't override your physical stress with thoughts. It just, basically our conscious brain is only 5% of the workings in there. It's the subconscious
Oh,
that's really running the show. And so,
okay.
by doing little affirmations like, I am calm, I am peaceful, I am stuff, it kind of just doesn't cut the mustard. You have to get in and speak the body's language. So if you override the breathing and you breathe in a very deep and slow way, that's going to give feedback up to the brain. Oh, okay, she's breathing nice and slow. It must be okay. And
Okay.
the most beneficial way of breathing, I mean, I've done loads of different breathing techniques over time, is something called the physiological sigh. I don't know if you've come across it, with a chap called Andrew Huberman, who's an amazing scientist in America. If you ever listen to his podcasts, they're absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
But he basically did a lot of research into this. And he says, obviously, when we're breathing very shallowly, we are not inflating the lungs properly. So we get a deficit of CO2 in there. And raised CO2 levels is obviously a stress trigger for the body. So it's just a sort of nasty
The cycle.
cycle. So
Yeah.
instead, if you can take a nice deep breath in, hold it, and then sniff in again. So you're really stretching the lungs out, and then do a really nice slow breath out. And he said, when we're breathing, basically, we employ two sides of our nervous system. So when we breathe in, we're on the sympathetic fight flight side. When we breathe out, it's the parasympathetic rest and digest side. So if you can extend the out breath, that's going to flip your body into a more calm state. And I have to say, you do 4 or 5 of those breaths, and you will instantly feel different in your body. It's
That's amazing. Because I'm just thinking about it, going back to the morning routines of children. And if you breathe, it does make you physically stop as well. So whatever action you're doing, you're stopping yourself, and that in itself will help regulate the breathing. And you might not react then as you might normally would react.
no,
Okay.
but it also just gets you to stand back and have a bit of space.
Yeah.
Where was I going? I don't need to go down.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes, exactly. Yes, I don't want to go. That's the thing. You don't want to go down that route,
yeah,
but your mind takes you down there unwillingly, and it's very hard to pull it back sometimes. So
completely.
breathing, and actually, just as you're talking, I'm trying to breathe a lot more deeply, and it automatically it gives you that calmer state.
Yeah, 100.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
You might have already answered the next question I'm going to ask you. We are going to start to finish up, but there's just a couple more, and one of them is, and I don't want to add to people's already busy lives, but if there is one small but powerful shift for someone listening that they could do today that will help them feel less overwhelmed, what would that be?
Well, number one is breathing, 100%.
That's right. Yeah.
Because it's so easy to go to. The other thing that I have found in my journey, which has been hugely valuable, is making sure that you have a good tribe.
Tribe is in
Tribe,
a group of,
good group of friends
yeah.
where you can be totally vulnerable. And you know that it's going to be received in a compassionate and empathic way and supportive.
Okay.
Because knowing you've got that kind of backup, when you're feeling stressed, being able to talk about it is incredibly valuable.
Okay.
But obviously, you need to be doing it with people who are going to kind of react in the right way. It doesn't have to be very big, even 2 or 3 friends, just that you can ring up and go, help, I'm really in the shit here. I need an ear.
I can totally see that.
Or am I going mad? This is where my thought processes are going. And they can just go, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
It's really
But everyone needs to be on the same page as well, because you like you say, when you open yourself up to vulnerability, you don't want to feel that you're giving too much of yourself and not getting anything in return. So that's right. It's that tribe of people that that they can be as open with you as you are going to be with them.
100%. You're so right. It does need to be a two-way street.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a great breathe and find your tribe.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And then finally, the question I want to ask is, obviously the podcast is called Thriving in Our 40s. So what does thriving in our 40s look like to you?
Wow. Gosh. I think um particularly for women, it's about self-care. 40s can be such a challenging time. Your kids are, well, depending on where you are, sometimes your kids are kind of going off into the big bad world, which has its own stresses. But with that, for me, it's about learning to stand back, putting them in a little protective bubble and trusting that they're going to be okay.
Okay.
Not micromanaging, because that's just doesn't work for anybody. Also, it can be a time where you're kind of tipping over into your parents might be getting older, and the kind of the balance is changing, and you're sort of becoming more the parent and looking after them. So again, on women, I feel there is this enormous load on us, and of course, because we've been set up in society to be the ones who look after everybody and take care of everything, to the detriment of ourselves. I think the key is to make sure that you have some self-nurturing practices that you do every day, whatever that looks like for you. It could be a bit of meditation. It could be, if you're getting out of the shower in the morning, just spend 2 minutes, maybe, rubbing some lovely, oils into your lovely clean ones without nasty chemicals into your body, but doing it really mindfully. So you're like, thanking your feet and your ankles and your legs, and for all the amazing things that our bodies allow us to do. So it's that kind of space, and also trying to get into a routine of making sure that you do something every day that brings you joy. Because we can get so bogged down into our to-do list and jobs, and then that to-do list, we will never get to the end. It took me a long time to work that one out. I don't know
It's true.
there will always be jobs to do. So at a certain point in your day, you're like, enough.
Okay.
That's enough. Now it's my time. And whatever that looks like, you want to be painting by numbers, or sewing, or jigsawing, or even just, sometimes when I'm really tired, I just want to sit in front of TV and watch something nice. For me, that's another thing about stress. When you're watching TV, your body cannot differentiate between what you're seeing on telly and reality. So it thinks that's really happening. And if you go to bed on thrillers or police dramas or, any of those kind of things, you will go to bed full of stress hormones. And it just
It
doesn't.
makes complete sense, but I've never thought of it like that at all. But it does make sense. The same with being on a screen, isn't it? You're keeping that part of the mind active,
Yeah,
aren't you?
absolutely. So again, sort of making the end of your day calm and nurturing. It's like, we do it with our kids, when they're really little, you do a nice calm bath time and you're like, my husband would come out and I'd like, don't jazz them up. This is time, into bed, lovely, gentle story. But this is what we should be doing with ourselves. And people are on
Mm,
screens till bedtime and then they leave
yeah,
and they're like, oh, no, then I couldn't sleep. And you're like, well, I'm not,
yeah,
because we have,
yeah.
allowed ourselves to wind down so the body goes, oh, okay, all is well, and it's safe enough for me to have good quality deep sleep.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. It has been such a joy talking to you, Kate, and there's so much more we could go on to talk about, but we are going to wrap it up here because I want to share the information where people can find out more about you. So will you tell us, whether you've got a website or whether you're on any socials, how can people get in touch with you if they want to discover more about your work?
Well, yes, I have a website, Kate Chaytor-Norris, and I do have an Instagram, but it's not hugely well.
It's
No,
just having a little rest. It's breathing. It's having a bit of a breather.
so I have spurts where I'm like, inspired to do lots of things, but at the moment, having a little rest.
Okay, well, I'll put those links in the show notes anyway, so people can find them. But obviously, people can reach out to you if they want to obviously learn out more about themselves and what they can do with you going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And, my book is a really good place to start. I've had lots of people who were going to kind of book in for a session, and they've got the book and they're like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing, which is great. So, yes.
I'll put that link in as well. I'll put it all in there. That's wonderful. But thank you again for your time. It's been an invaluable conversation to have because I think it's very easy just to, like we've touched on, to think I'm stressed. It's what I am. Just get on with it. But
Yeah,
I personally don't want to have the next few decades of my life feeling like I'm, gonna flip. So what you've discussed with the breathing, a bit of self-care, the right eating and the right nutrients, I think if you all try and combine that as much as possible, then you are giving yourself that best chance.
yes, absolutely. It'll pay huge dividends to how well your body ages.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.